Hello, everyone. It's really good to see you again. I'm Anne-Marie Green alongside Vladimir Duthier. And I know I've said this a few times already. It is a historic day for a number of reasons. We are heading into the second impeachment of a former president. We haven't had a president be impeached more than once, and we haven't had a former president ever impeached. And, you know, a lot of what we're going to be seeing now is arguments over the Constitution. What did the founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, really intended when they, you know, allowed for the impeachment of someone who was in office? It's going to be a really interesting day. And the first day of arguments will be about whether or not this whole process is even constitutional. Yeah, it's an important point to make, Anne-Marie, and I don't think that we, you know, it will be hard to do it justice given the weightiness of what we are seeing happening in Washington, D.C. today. We've never had a former president, as you say, impeached, and we've never had a president of the United States impeached twice. Donald J. Trump will hold that distinction. And so it is a first in the United States. This former president, President Trump, will face his second impeachment trial this afternoon. And the Senate showdown is expected to begin at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now, here's what Democrats are trying to do. They are trying to lay out their case for convicting Mr. Trump of inciting an insurrection on January the 6th. Now, ahead of the trial, most Republicans and the former president's legal team, as you say, Anne-Marie, have already accused the House managers of political theater. They say it's not constitutional, but a CBS News poll finds most Americans, 56%, that is a significant number, 56% believe that the United States Senate should convict former President Trump. Nikole Killion is following the latest on Capitol Hill.
Today will mostly be procedural, with a debate on the constitutionality of the trial. If a majority votes to move forward, then formal argument will begin Wednesday.
Is Donald Trump guilty of inciting a violent mob against the United States?
It is the central question facing senators as they take socially distant seats today in the same chamber where they were evacuated 1 month ago as rioters stormed the Capitol. House impeachment managers who have been meeting daily plan to use video evidence and the former president's own words against him, calling his actions in a pretrial brief Monday the most grievous constitutional crime ever committed by a president.
Not only did he light the fire, which we know he did, he poured gasoline on the fire.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, an impeachment manager in Mr. Trump's first trial, has advised the current team.
Well, I think it's going to be important for the impeachment managers to connect the dots before the American people, highlight many of the statements that the president made, including at that January 6th rally, where I believe he used the word fight 15 or 16 times.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
In a 78-page legal brief, Mr. Trump's lawyers argued the president used the word fight in a figurative sense and dismissed the trial as political theater. Trump advisor Jason Miller says the whole thing is a waste of time.
The whole point of an impeachment is to try to remove someone from office. Well, if someone's out of office, then what's the point in going and trying to do the impeachment?
And some Republicans say the party has already moved on.
The Democrats continue to obsess about Donald Trump when Donald Trump left office and went to Florida 3 weeks ago.
On that point, Miller isn't sold.
I think President Trump will be a major force in the 2022 midterms.
This trial will move relatively quickly, with both sides getting about 2 days to present their case, and then they will likely work through part of the weekend. The former president is expected to watch a good chunk of the trial. Anne-Marie, Vlad.
Nikole, thank you. So for more, let's bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's following the very latest from our Washington bureau. All right, Caitlin, let's just start with the basics. What will people see today? Before we get into the nitty-gritty of sort of the arguments, as the trial gets underway, what will people be seeing?
Good morning. Well, today is all about, should this trial happen at all? You're going to hear from Trump's legal team and Republicans that they do not think this is constitutional to bring a trial against a former president, who they call now a private citizen. Democrats are arguing, however, that this is all about accountability. So today you will see a 4-hour-long debate about the constitutionality of having this trial at all. So you'll have the introductions, 4 hours of debate, and then the Senate will vote on whether this trial should proceed. Remember, we got a little bit of a preview recently when this came up in the Senate, introduced by Rand Paul, about the constitutionality arguments of this case, and all but 5 Republicans voted against having this trial, so or arguing that this trial wasn't constitutional. So that's a little bit of a preview, but remember, they just need a majority to move forward.
So, Caitlin, as you mentioned, as we've been mentioning, the Republicans and some critics are arguing that former President Trump has already left office, so this impeachment trial is purely political for Democrats to unite and target Mr. Trump once again. What will be the House impeachment manager's main argument for holding this trial today? And we should remind our viewers, of course, Caitlin, that this impeachment, this could have been scheduled before President Trump left office. I know that there are going to be Republicans that get up there and say, well, he's not the president anymore. Why are we doing this now? But just remind our viewers who was responsible for the timing of when this impeachment was supposed to happen.
You know, Vlad, I think that's a really important point, just to kind of reiterate the process here, because remember, just about a month ago, Republicans were in charge of the U.S. Senate, and so they were controlling the schedule. And what Republicans have been able to do is kind of, capitalize on the idea that it has been a month since the riots. People have short memories in terms of congressional processes, that the president was already impeached by the House when he was president. And so that's what you're going to hear from Democrats today, that this is not just coming up afterwards. The president was already impeached by the House, and this is part of that process to go to the Senate and have a trial about whether he should be convicted. And so that's really going to be the thread here from Democrats, is that this is all about accountability. And in some of their arguments, I just want to highlight a couple of things that they mention pointing to this accountability argument. They say that the Constitution's framers wouldn't have left us defenseless against a president's treachery in his final days. So they're arguing that just because the president committed a crime in his final days doesn't mean he should not be accountable for it after he leaves office. They also mention, of course, that the president was in office at the time he was impeached. And they also are wanting to speak to this First Amendment argument that the Trump legal team is putting forward. And that argument from Trump's team kind of covers a range. They say that on one hand, he didn't incite these riots. However, whatever he said at that rally was protected under free speech, and Democrats are arguing that free speech protects citizens against their government. It doesn't mean that office holders shouldn't be held accountable for their actions and words while in office. So that's kind of what we're going to see in terms of the constitutionality of having this trial at all.
So, Caitlin, during the last impeachment process, the Democrats were able to call a number of witnesses. We all watched as people described what, they believe occurred in the Ukraine, within the White House. But thus far, we haven't heard of any witnesses being called, except for the president himself, and he turned that down. Is the expectation moving forward that we could actually see witnesses testify at the trial, at the Senate trial?
Well, according to the rules that were established by McConnell and Schumer yesterday, the impeachment managers have the option, if they want, to bring up witnesses, but it's not clear that they will. And you're right to mention kind of the differences between this go-round and the last go-round. And the big difference here, and why we may not see witnesses, although we don't know, is because this all happened in public view. The riots happened everybody saw them on television, saw these events unfolding. They saw the president's speech given just right before those riots, and there's a long paper and video trail that has been long open to the public. Also, we have learned so much more information about these riots in the days after the events coming forward from police reports, and of course there have been many people apprehended for their involvement in the riot. So this is all kind of unfolded for the public to see. It's not, looking at transcripts and phone calls that happened behind the scenes or things that people couldn't see. And that's why you'll see kind of a reliance on the video evidence and everything that happened in plain view. So that raises the question of, does there need to be witnesses? We also know that, the party really wants to do two things at once. They want to go forward with this trial, but they also want to get back to the business of governing, especially getting this COVID relief package through. So the shorter this trial can be, perhaps the better for the Democrats in terms of being able to show that they want to also govern as well.
So, Caitlin, we shared that poll earlier before we introduced you about the number of Americans who would like to see the United States Senate convict President Trump. According to CBS News poll, 56% of them, the majority of Senate Republicans have already said, as we've been discussing, that they believe that this trial is unconstitutional. So the question becomes, I think, Caitlin, what are you hearing from your sources on the Hill as to the understanding that whilst the American people may want to see a conviction, Republicans are not in line for that? They just, what we've been hearing and seeing from those that have appeared on television, that have given quotes to newspaper reporters, is that they believe it's unconstitutional, so why bother? But there could be something else, and there is some reporting out there that Democrats also understand. Witnesses are great, but we've got this video, as you pointed out, Caitlin, and the video will show to the entire world what took place on that day. And we're in television. We live in a visual medium, or we work in a visual medium that can be extremely powerful. And what it could do, and this is what I'm wondering what you're hearing from your sources, is if they believe that showing this video evidence over an extended period of time will allow the Republican Party to untether itself from President Trump and perhaps even prevent President Trump from ever holding office again.
Well, a couple of different things to kind of consider here. First of all, the poll that we have out today showing a majority favor conviction, it's really interesting to look at the numbers among Republicans because it tells a very different story about where the Republican Party is and where their voters are on this issue. So our poll shows that most favor loyalty to Trump, with 46% of Republicans saying that it is very important for the party to be loyal to Trump. You're also seeing in our poll that many say that they would be inclined to join a new party if Donald Trump decided to kind of forge his own way and create a new party. And 71% of Republicans say that those who voted to impeach in the House or who vote to convict in the Senate are disloyal to the party. And we've seen the repercussions for a lot of these Republicans who voted in the House to impeach then President Trump. You're seeing primary challenges waged against some of these lawmakers. You're seeing state parties hold censures for some of these lawmakers. Of course, Liz Cheney, the number 3 in the House, her stature came into question by her own members, although she was able to survive with a healthy margin. So that kind of shows kind of where the party and where the voters are right now. And while Democrats will hope that this video evidence not only speaks to those who are already with them, but maybe reminds people about what happened a month ago. Because remember, everybody has short memories, and so bringing up this video again could remind people about how serious this was. Whether that convinces anybody remains to be seen. But hearing from what lawmakers have been talking about, and again, the way in which they're focusing on the process, not necessarily the president's behavior, but the process of this at all, suggests that they want to move on, that they don't want to kind of bring back in the idea of Trump in the fold. because they want to kind of unite against the party in power. And when you are in the minority in Washington, you're trying to figure out how to gain power back. And one thing that really galvanizes a party is kind of this opposition to the other side. And so that's kind of what we're seeing among Republican lawmakers, that they want to move on from this, and they know that their base is still very favorable to the former president.
I think that's all really, really interesting. You know, Vlad, as you were asking the question, I was thinking about this video, and I was thinking, you know, it all depends on who the audience is, because this video from January 6th, many of us have seen over and over and over again. I mean, I think if you haven't seen it, if you live in this country and you haven't seen that video, you really haven't been paying attention. And if it isn't enough to move the needle for you, if you don't think that it's worthy of impeachment now, then I don't know if you'll believe that later on as the arguments continue to build. But for the senators who were actually in the building at the time, it's got to have a much more sort of emotional impact on them. But the likelihood of that causing them to vote differently, I don't know. That would be very surprising considering what you just said, Caitlin, about where the support lies. And I was talking to Anthony Salvanto earlier today when, you know, we brought up that 56% statistic. He said, you know, roughly that's how the country voted. And so that gives you like a little indication of the support that he still enjoys, President Trump still enjoys. Listen, very quickly, Caitlin, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked if President Biden believed that Mr. Trump should be impeached and barred from holding office again. Of course, he told CBS News that he doesn't believe President Trump should be getting intelligence briefings. Here's how she responded.
He's no longer in the Senate. He's retired from the Senate, and he's president of the United States, and his focus is on getting relief to the American people, and that's exactly what he's conveyed publicly, of course, and privately as well. And he'll leave it to his former colleagues in the Senate or members of the Senate to determine the path forward. He ran against him because he felt he was unfit for office, and he defeated him. And that's why he's no longer President Trump is no longer president of the United States. So I think his views of the former president are pretty clear, but he's going to leave it to the Senate to see this impeachment proceedings through.
What do you make of her response, Caitlin?
Well, that's consistent with what we've been hearing from the White House for the past several weeks, that they're very wary about weighing in on impeachment. They want to leave it to Congress because they are very much focused on what their governing priorities are, especially trying to get this COVID relief package through and make good on a promise that they made in the campaign. And they also don't want to look like they are trying to kind of, participate or kind of work on focusing on the conviction of a former political rival. They don't think that weighing in here really does them much good in terms of trying to move forward on it. So what Biden has said and what the White House has said is, look, this is up to the Senate. We are going to be focused on the tasks at hand. And that priority, of course, is COVID relief and some of these other measures that we've seen. One contrast between this president and the last one, Jen Psaki said that he probably won't be watching much of this trial on television. And we know that's a contrast to the former president who watched a lot of television. So when you look at the president's schedule today, they have a schedule for him, a briefing scheduled later this afternoon. So they are trying to make clear that he's not going to be really paying as much attention to this trial.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if we see the former president on a golf course, we'll know he's not watching, but my suspicion is that he will not be playing golf over the next couple of days while this is happening. The other thing, Caitlin, real quick before we let you go, we talked a lot about this video evidence. I know that some of the president's lawyers, the former president's lawyers, are going to try to argue that incendiary language is not an impeachable offense. They're hoping to show video of prominent Democrats, for example, Cory Booker, saying that people should get in the face of Trump supporters as a way to contrast the words that the Democrats believe incited the insurrection on January 6th, although a lot of people will just say that's a lot of whataboutism. Cory Booker or Maxine Waters or somebody else saying something to their supporters is not the same as what we saw take place on the 6th, where people physically attacked police officers with flagpoles. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. It's interesting to note that there will be a lot of this video evidence on display, some of which I believe, guys, that we haven't seen yet. And I think also, Anne-Marie, to your point about the video that people have seen, I think at this point, when you turn on the television and you see some of that video, you go, oh, yeah, that happened January 6th. But there are other pieces of video that I would like to believe that we haven't seen yet, that the FBI has sourced, that they've shared with members of Congress, and there may be some things we haven't seen that could prove shocking. So we'll have to see how it all plays out.